Did you ever actually consider knocking it completely on the head and retiring? Did it get that bad at any point?
There was a point after that where I hadn't touched the guitar for ages, and the whole it just related everything to what had happened, the tragedy that had happened.
Is it true that you actually bought your first guitar after hearing Elvis Presley?
No, it's not quite like that.
I always thought it was Baby Let's Play House. That's one of the stories.
Well, I know. We actually had a guitar in the house. It's the guitar made some sort of intervention into the family. There wasn't a guitarist musician in the family, like relative, an uncle or whatever, or indeed my parents. But the guitar was there, and the music started to appear on the television. And we'll say Lonnie Donegan here because I remember going to school and there was a boy playing the guitar, and he was doing some of these Lonnie Donegan songs like Rock Island Line. Was seduced by the sounds of rock and roll through their radios, and they heard this wild music, and whether it was a sort of the Little Richard, sort of big band stuff, but certainly the aspect of what was coming from the more rockabilly side of it. So the sort of Elvis Presley and Bill Black and Scotty Moore, that sort of nucleus. If you really want to know, the rock and roll of the 50s was played by young, really rebellious people. And if you think about like Elvis Presley, who combined white music and black music and came right under the radar, that he was then his music was being played to young kids, and it was really controversial, but he managed to pull that off. All the rest of the ones you hear about, like Buddy Holly and Gene Vincent and all those, they were all young people playing, Chuck Berry, all that. They were playing lyrics for young people they could relate to. So it was a real sort of, real change for the whole society then. By this point, I'd been seduced by music coming out of the speakers, the radio, and really it was American music that was sort of translated, either the real product coming through, the rock and roll, rockabilly, Little Richard, that sort of thing, or it was like the local heroes like Cliff Richard, or there was this guy called Lonnie Donegan who started like the whole skiffle movement, and skiffle meant that if you had a guitar, then you could actually possibly be able to play it and do these sort of songs. And a lot of the guitarists from the 60s, they all started off the same way, really. And I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew exactly how to go about doing it if I could find the personnel. Now, the idea of Led Zeppelin I that I had was that there was going to be a guitar tour de force. However, it was not going to be at the expense of the other musicians, so everyone was going to be featured, and the group character, if you like, the fusion of the musicians, was going to be representative of each of the individuals. And then I'd seen John Bonham play. I felt him play, actually. It was quite an experience. And he was playing with a musician called Tim Rose, who wrote Morning Dew. I think he might have written Hey Joe as well, that Jimi Hendrix did. So and John Paul Jones heard I was getting a band together and called me out and said, I hear you're putting a band together, would you consider me on bass? And I said, okay, marvellous, because I'd played with him in the studios and various sessions. Robert had a short time when he played with John Bonham, but John Bonham was off and playing around and starting to make a name for himself outside of Birmingham. And we had this one rehearsal in a small rehearsal room, not as large as this room even. And
but did you know right away when you started out that this is going to be something extraordinary?
Yes, from the very first, we knew that there was so much power, even from the first song that we actually got together and played together. It was like, wow, that was, by the end of it, by the end of this, whatever it was, 5 minutes that we just played, it was like, well, this is phenomenal. We all knew instinctively from that point that we'd never felt anything like that before, because it was 4 musical equals with this sort of communion, and from that point I got everybody to come to my house and we started rehearsing. You can have one virtuoso musician in a band, or you can have a superb singer in another band, but it sort of functions all right around that. But you get 4 musicians who are really, really, I mean, you know, the top, the creme de la creme, and then and that even that isn't necessarily going to work if they play together. We've seen that with a lot of supergroups. It didn't work. We had the ability to be able to play together and play together really well. So with the 4 of us, it took on a 5th element, which is what you hear. I had a vision of what I wanted to do with the band, with the music of it. It was certainly going to be. It was going to have sort of blues to it. It was going to have rock to it, and there was going to be sort of more eclectic taste to it too. I mean, for example, you know, "Babe, I'm Going to Leave You," things like that. Things that, for example, the way that I'd planned that out was no one else had ever done anything like that before. It was a very inspired time for all of us at the time that we were living in the Headley Grange as a residence, eating, sleeping, making music. That's what we were doing day after day after day. And it sort of tells when you hear the 4th album. But, you know, Stairway is a sort of byproduct of it, of all of that. But, you know, it's obviously been quite substantial in as a milestone for Led Zeppelin. But when we came together as Led Zeppelin, even though it's a vehicle that I was aspiring towards, the fact that fate determined that these 4 musicians come together in a very, very short time, and they're all inspired by each other. Because on that first album of Led Zeppelin, I didn't play anything in that sort of realm beforehand that were just about getting to the point where they were playing whole sides of albums. I realized that if you had an album that had each track almost setting up, as you listen to one track, it would set up the second track, because there would be such a diversity upon the album of different styles and different moods that it would capture people's imagination when they listened to it. And now we had the vehicle with the FM radio to be able to do that. So
I mean, the band, Led Zeppelin, really kind of changed the looking at live performance. I mean, you're talking about, you know, kind of a happening and a performance type of art. I mean, this is as big as the arenas would get, right? I mean, didn't Zeppelin really start the large arena shows?
The thing with Led Zeppelin is that right from the beginning of it, within a few months going into 1969, we can't supply the demand. Everywhere that we play is full. And we start doing repeat nights in places, and it's still full. So when we were doing outside events, it wasn't confined by the 4 walls, and you can see that it was just immense. The record was being played all over the United States, and it was via radio, because of course there wasn't cell phones, there wasn't the internet, it was the word by radio. That this band was just incredible. And as we moved across the United States, we, by say March, you know, we were on the maybe even before that, February, March, we were on the East Coast and the West Coast, and people were just coming and just coming to see us. It was incredible because the reception was amazing.
And the very first 2 concerts, the first one being Atlanta, had like 53,000 people there, and the next one, Tampa, Florida, 57, and suddenly I thought, my goodness, what's going on? You know, it's crazy. You know, it's the way that people were really just, you know, flocking to us with this great loyalty. And the sort of promoters that were saying, oh, they'll never do it, you know, nobody's going to turn up because they haven't put out any product. And it suddenly occurred to me that, you know, we had a different sort of following to most people.
What I do know is that the promoter said it was so many people, and Peter Grant didn't believe it because he knew what an audience looked like, because we played to, I don't know, 50,000, 60,000 in America, and you could see what that looked like. And we took a photograph of it, and he counted all the heads, because it came out to more like 400,000 people, but the promoter didn't want to pay, you see. And I must say that wherever we went, from 1968 to 1980, there were always more people every time that we went to play. And it was incredible. But here comes the interesting thing, was that from that point onwards, we were never able to satisfy the demand of people that came to see us. We were doing multiple shows in cities, and we would still just sell out over all the years that we played. The thing about the music was that was it. That was the intoxicant of the whole thing. The reality of it was that if you were in a band like that, you just had that energy, to be honest with you, because it was just so exhilarating. You can imagine if you play at that intensity for both him, myself, or whatever, for 3 hours, and it's not just like a little tap of adrenaline, it's like the floodgates of adrenaline, and it was difficult to sleep after concerts, and you know, it was on a roller coaster, you know, on touring, which could almost be slightly mad, you know, but you can understand with the intensity of that playing. But the truth of it was, as those tours got longer, it was difficult, and I know everyone's going to laugh, but it would get to the point where you didn't sleep for a night, and then during Madison Square Garden for the filming in 1973, I don't think I really slept for like whatever it was, 5 days or whatever. Wow. But it built up from way back in the early part of that tour, and I wasn't sort of losing sleep every night, but it just sort of built. It was just a sort of energy tap, was difficult to switch off. Purely for the fact that if you're playing for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, sometimes 3.5 hours, you'd build up so much adrenaline from that when you come off stage, you couldn't possibly just go home and sort of go to bed. So you would go out and you go to sort of maybe clubs or whatever, just to sort of start stabilizing again. So really the intoxicant was the music.
Did you ever think, stop, I need to get off?
No, I must say that the pace of the tours was pretty frenetic, if you like. At the end of those tours, I took time out, if you like, you know, so there was quite a balance, there's quite a yin-yang to it, because I couldn't really live at that pace, you know, throughout a whole year, for example. So it was, you know, there was pacing towards the tours, and then time to sort of reflect, if you like, after that.